companies are driven a lot of times by this one thought saying, okay, we need to be competitive, and my competitor has bot, so I need a bot. Yet nobody's actually standing still and saying, okay, but what are we going to use that bot for? Okay.
Hello and welcome to a whole new episode of Engati CX. I'm your host Drishti and today we have a tech expert with us on the show. But before I introduce you to our guest, allow me to introduce you to the magic of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code digital CX platform available across 14 channels with 45,000 solutions created across 187 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by INC.com, Tech World, CIO, and many others. We run the Engati blog, video channel, and the Engati CX podcast, receiving upwards of 400,000 visitors annually. And now for our guest, Jerome Van Der Linden is the CEO and co-founder of Bot Implementation. He has over 20 years of experience of international experience in go-to-marketing strategy, development and activation, performance management, project and change management. So hi Jerome, we are really happy to have you on Engati.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you for having me.
So the first question that I would like to begin with
Yeah.
is, can you tell us something about what GoBright.ai is and uh, the vision and mission of the company?
So Go Bright is actually a spin-off which started from our other company, Bot Implementation Institute. So we started this in beginning of 2019. Sorry, I'm a little bit of a cold. No COVID or anything, but and in Bot Implementation Institute, what we try to do is we try to help, or we're helping basically companies go for the proper process in setting up bots, chat bots, voice bots, etc. Now, in there, what we've done is we developed a proprietary formula, which basically said, okay, these are the right steps in order to move forward, in order to implement the bot. And through the discussions with one of our clients, what we came to is that we saw a real clear opportunity in the market. There was a lot of development already. We saw some development already with chatbots in the field of surveys. But what hasn't been done yet, and what really intrigued us, is to go that extra mile. And what we saw was this opportunity of really stretching a little bit the barriers or the limits of what a bot can do. So what we decided to do is establish a company, a spin-off, GoBright.ai, in order to start doing qualitative research and then, more importantly, one-on-one interviews with clients. So we're using the bot as in our case, it's called Kira. And Kira is a bot that performs a qualitative interview with panel members. So we select a person, and then instead of the limitations that you have with qualitative research, where basically it's all face-to-face or via Zoom on what we're doing now, what allows us the bot to do is volume, and it's really at scale, to do qualitative research at scale, ultimately taking away any need that you have for quantitative surveys, because quantitative surveys ultimately is the extension of your qualitative research. And here we see a real clear opportunity, but also a challenge, because effectively we're using the bot in a completely different way of what it was originally designed for. Let's face it, I mean, what we're seeing, and that's a discussion we had as well, is ultimately a bot is more designed as a customer service kind of solution. It responds on the basis of a certain inquiry, and it responds really well if you have a very clear defined inquiry that is coming. In case of market research, that inquiry is not really that clear, and ultimately you have a wealth of different solutions and so on. So we had to build an entire new infrastructure around that, and a way of interviewing that allows us really to go in depth and not just ask the open question and then basically analyze the response with an AI. And that's what GoBright is. So we're kicking off now. We're launching it with various companies now, to see in terms of, and to learn as well, what the needs of those companies are and how we can move forward with it. So an exciting time.
Sounds really amazing, and all the best for the launch, and it would be successful, definitely.
Well, in all honesty, we've seen a lot of positive feedback already from large of big companies, so this is going to be a very exciting path.
Definitely, it would be. So, how can we use chat and voice bots so that they bring this wealth of engagement opportunities?
Well, like the way we're doing it is we are very much falling back on our experience that we had with bot implementation. And this was a very painful journey. I think ultimately with bot implementation, what we did was we teach all the errors, the issues that we faced ourselves, and not to have people go through the same troublesome period, because it's a long learning period, bots, but at the same time it can be extremely rewarding. So what we try to do is really, over the period where we started playing with bots, we build up and defined our own formula. And our own formula is basically, it's like a project management type of formula, whereby we look at 5 key steps, which is 1, discovery, design, implement, deploy, and measure. And with those 5 stages of a bot implementation process, of the bot implementation formula, effectively, you will always have the right steps in place in order to come to a right solution. A lot of companies just jump into bots straight away and say, oh, we want a bot. But ultimately, it doesn't really bring anything, because if you don't know the clear purpose of it, you will never be able to bring a solution that is there, that is helpful, and that brings you to the ultimate goal of what you're trying to achieve. And in large companies, what we're seeing as well is basically you're then, because the ownership is not clear, you will have departments going in all kinds of different directions because everybody's expecting that there is a different solution to that bot. So what we really try to do is take those steps, and in the discovery, the key point, and that's what we always say we start with the why. So why do you want a bot? One is, what is the business purpose? Where in the journey do you do the bot? And who are you going to talk to? And if you have those 3 questions, key questions answered, then you can start thinking about what is the conversation we need to do, what is my persona of the bot, and ultimately, what is the technology? Because a lot of companies still as well, they go first and say, oh, that's a nice company, let's start with that. But they have absolutely no clue whether that company or the solution that that company brings actually is the right solution for them. So that's really key on what we're seeing there. I went a little bit overboard, and sorry.
Not really. So, what are the critical steps while building a conversation design for the bots?
So like I said, I mean, we start with the why, and when we have the why defined, we will start basically with one key thing, which is the persona. What is the persona of the bot, and who is this bot communicating with? And we've done some podcasts on this as well, whereby basically, I mean, when you build a bot, which is, for instance, extremely into, imagine you have a fitness studio. Your audience in the fitness studio is primarily 35-year-old single moms or anything like that. But you're going in there with a bot which has a persona of an 18-year-old male instructor or whatever. This will never work. So it's really about aligning the persona of your bot to your audience. That will bring a certain type of communication, a certain language usage, etc. already forth. And from there, you start with the conversations. And then in the conversation, is very key is, and this is what we say to everybody, is make sure that the bot is, that it's clear that it's a bot and not a human. You have a lot of companies still where it's saying, hey, it's a human, especially in customer research, in customer service areas. It's a human you're talking to. But you see on the basis of the response that you will never be able to meet that same level. So that's really key on the basis of that. And then we go through the so-called must-have conversations. And the must-have conversations are really about the introduction. What is the role of the bot? How should the bot react? Things like opt-in, opt-out for the client. It's really about those basic rules which allow the bot, which is a safe space basically for the consumer. Because ultimately, a lot of consumers have never had any experience with a bot. So when they come in, and I've seen a lot of bots already, you have no clue how to get out, because it's never explained. It's never really shown clearly in terms of how can I opt in, how can I opt out, and so on as well. That brings a certain amount of trust. And then what we do is we do a so-called intimacy score. And what we do here is, you see a lot of bots whereby straight up front, all your details are being requested. Your social security number, your email address, and so on. Yet they've never gone through the pages of really building that rapport with the client. So, and that's really key. The way we see it always is, you go into a bar and you try to have a conversation with a random person at the bar. Now, you will never, that person will never tell you their email address and all their details if you haven't introduced yourself properly, if you haven't gone through those first steps of getting to know each other and so on. And that's really key. So this is really why we were saying is, okay, what is the level of question, the level of intimacy you can put in your question at which stage of the conversation? Because ultimately, with a customer service bot, yes, it's about getting the client quickly through it towards a solution. But when you have a sales bot, ultimately, you want to keep him in that scope and keep him talking and ultimately sell something. So that's really key.
Well, the example that you gave really makes sense. That people upfront just asking about user details, it just scares away people and they might just leave the bot. So
exactly, and they're destroying the world a little bit for every other bot implementation specialist, because ultimately people go away with a very bad feeling about bots. And here the aim is really about setting some kind of ground rules for how you engage with the consumer. Another one which I really love is the amount of text that people are using. They're basically copying an email into a bot and hope it will work, which ultimately is never the case. I mean, when I chat or when you chat, the amount of words that you use are very limited. It's a specific language usage. As a result, what we're seeing as well is that you have a very different profile in terms of bot implementation in various companies. I mean, the skill set is completely different than a digital communication specialist who's focusing mainly on email kind of communication. If he then starts to do bots, you will see a massive discrepancy in terms of the way the language is being used and so on as well. And this needs to be really separated very clearly.
that's true. So what are some important artificial intelligence processes that can help in conversational marketing?
Well, I'm not the tech expert with our company, so Hans is my tech expert. he's basically the guy who's really helping us out on all these things. I'm more the smooth talking conversational specialist. I'm sorry, but for us, the key thing, and Go Bright in particular, what we're using AI for, and we've extended a lot of the capability, and we're looking here for as well, is first of all, we are creating a situation whereby a bot needs to be able to answer on any comment a consumer makes. And this was something we are trying to still learning and still putting our heads around as well, because ultimately, when you ask a question, what is your impression of a certain product? You have a wealth of information of stuff that comes your way where the bot needs to respond on the basis of that. So we've looked for ways on how we can adopt that, because you can't build a bot or a response which tries to tackle everything. I mean, you will never come up with all the ideas on the basis of that. So we are using AI on that element, whereby we really see is, okay, how can we integrate that? How adaptable is the AI as well? On the other hand, what we're looking at is sentiment management, and most recently as well, emotion management. Because sentiment and emotion, it becomes the next level, basically, in terms of how you do customer research, right? Sentiment is relatively straightforward. A lot of the bots have this and so on. Emotion is going a little bit a step further, and whereby we're trying to understand is the language that is being used by the consumer. How is this put in a certain area in order to understand more or less what that emotion is that consumer has about a certain product, about a certain packaging, about a certain design, etc. And ultimately, the AI does the heavy lifting for us. I mean, without an AI, you can't have a relatively small organization and a lean organization run a complex solution as what we're trying to do with Go Bright AI. So here, really, the AI is our heavy lifting buddy, more or less, who's bringing and it does the full heavy analytics and conversational, emotional analytics as well within our company. So that's the core aspect, basically, of AI in our organization.
That's good. I know I know the flow and stuff of the bot, and that's what makes it more and more interesting. That using two different things and bringing a solution together to understand what the user wants to say, and definitely for market research, this is the core element that you would require for your bot to function properly.
Exactly. And we will see. I mean, it is what I like about the AI as well is the continuous learning aspect of it and the level of expertise that they're gaining. Ultimately, you can see it more or less as an employee which you have in your team, which starts out young and over the years is learning and gaining more experience, etc., in the way they're doing. Yet the bot does it a little bit quicker. And we take away with the AI, we effectively take away a lot of the stuff that is non-added value, but brings ultimately a high end result. And that's the critical part there.
Agree. So, what are some of the challenges of large companies when they want to implement conversational marketing?
What we've seen so far is one key thing, and this is the reason why we started a little bit with the formula as well, is companies are driven a lot of times by this one thought saying, okay, we need to be competitive, and my competitor has bot, so I need a bot. Yet nobody's actually standing still and saying, okay, but what are we going to use that bot for? Okay, and this is really why we came back ultimately with this formula with our discovery phase as well. And that's one of the key elements that we do with companies is the discovery phase, where we simply say, look, guys, stop, stand, have a look first of what is your business objective? What are you trying to achieve? Then you have a look in terms of, okay, what is your current customer journey? And are there any gaps in that customer journey? Because in a lot of cases, we had several cases where we actually came in already and we stopped after that first meeting because it didn't have any sense. I mean, ultimately, you need to sometimes protect companies against themselves or against the decision-making process, because if it doesn't bring any value, why invest in it and why go through this overall process of setting something up which doesn't bring anything? So this is really about key is understanding what the business purpose is and see where the benefit is within your customer journey and who do you want to talk to, because if you're talking to 80-year-olds or whatever, I can guarantee you nobody's going to pick up that telephone and is going to chat with the bot, right? They still want that human contact and so on. But, and then on the other hand, what is really critical in there as well is skill set. I mean, I touched upon that a little bit before already, it is a very young industry. Now, I'm not so young anymore. I mean, okay, I'm a little bit gray, but we went through the expertise, through the experience of really re-educating ourselves, because we like the challenge. So, but what we see is it's a super young industry still, yet people don't really treat it like that. And ultimately, it is a skill set which is very, very different. Conversational design is very, very different than any graphic design or website design or email marketing. Yeah, it is a completely different aspect, because ultimately, none of those solutions, you have that direct interaction aspect. And the direct interaction aspect, that one-on-one conversation with your consumer, that is the critical point, because there is no filter anymore. An email, you can go, it's like, yeah, read through it if you don't want, okay. But here you have a bot ultimately talking directly to you, talking directly either your language, if they do it properly, or absolutely not talking your language. Now, with those two little differences, your consumer is either in or out. Now, for a company, that should be, whoa, that is a big difference. Because ultimately, if you have a bot, you have a an extremely scary subject in the end, but also a very rewarding subject. Because if you do it right, you have a wealth of opportunity, because all of a sudden, every company likes to go beyond the GDPR stories and so on about the data privacy and so on. But here you have a situation, you have a channel whereby consumers directly give you the right to talk to them, provide you information about who they are, what they want, and so on. Which company wouldn't want that? So it's really critical there that you have the right skill set behind it. One, very technical, because you need that technical expertise to set it up, and this is why Hans is a critical part in our conversation, in our organization as well. And on the other hand, the conversation design. So what we did is, and ultimately, this is why we have a really good team with us, because on the one hand, we have the technical design, the technical knowledge, and on the other hand, we have the conversational knowledge and the more designy stuff, and we've mixed that. But a lot of companies try to bundle it in one, and when you're talking to those companies, they're either going super technical or super designy and hand it out to an agency, which is extremely difficult when you do that on a one-to-one basis. So the key challenge that we see is, one, hire the right skill set and make sure that the purpose and the objective of that bot is clear and well defined.
That totally makes sense. Like when you understand what the goal you want to achieve from the bot, then um, it becomes easy to design the conversation as well, because just asking, like the example you mentioned first, if I want somebody to convert or maybe have a sales bot and I'm just putting out questions asking about their details, then it's not going to work definitely.
Exactly. And we have a key point in there as well, as the measurement phase. And ultimately, the measurement phase is critical for a company as well. Yeah, the KPIs that you have for website hits and all those kind of things. You have the same with the bot, ultimately. But if you have no clue what the purpose is, how do you know what you need to measure? So how do you know what the effectiveness is of the bot? And that is really the critical point that we're seeing there. It's, if that first bit is there, it's solid, and everybody's bought into that, then expand the bot and basically make an extension of your consumer contact point.
True, true. So, what are the components that we need to keep in mind before launching the chatbot?
So before launching the chatbot, what we usually start with, like I said already, the why, and I keep coming back to this, I'm sorry for that. But basically, I mean, after the why, it's really about, one, persona design. So do all those elements, go for the conversation already. And then after the conversation, you go really select your solution, your ecosystem. Because ultimately your ecosystem, and you know that as well as I do, not every provider of a bot can provide the right solution to every company. Let's face it, right? There is a lot of competition out there, but ultimately there is very big differences in terms of which platform, what is the level of AI, what's the user friendliness, who's going to use the bot, etc., etc., etc. And all those elements are critical in your decision making. And from there, then it's really about building and deploying. So when those elements are captured, so really the discovery phase and the design phase, then with that you have a very solid basis to really start deploying a bot. And from there it almost becomes natural. And then what we say is usually we take really small steps. So you start with, for instance, one step within the customer journey, and from there you take it like a continuous improvement loop to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. And with each step you gain expertise, and in each step basically everybody understands what the bot can bring and how it can further evolve. But I think the key point, and that is what a lot of companies tend to forget about as well, is it's not just you build the bot, you design it, you launch it, and yay, we're done. It's really about this continuous improvement story, about the iteration that you constantly have. Because with every engagement that the bot has, you learn, you improve, and you need to adjust. And that's really key.
That's so true, and I completely agree. Like people have this not only with bots but with every technology that they implement in their organization. They think that the implementation was the last phase and now they are done, but that's actually the starting phase, and the next part might also take the similar amount of efforts. Just that one system is set, and now you just have to improve on whatever is set, but it still needs
Exactly.
efforts.
Exactly. And it's key as well that you then have, and that companies don't look at agencies to simply set up the first part and then basically abandon the agency and say, okay, then we're done, and then it will run for us for the remaining 2 years. It will not work like that. So, and they need to be very clear on that when the continuous process, and we'll have continuous alterations and adjustments, and that will be the biggest part and the biggest bulk of the development ultimately.
That's true. So, are there any other sound bites that you would like to leave with our audience?
Well, yes. Because I love talking. Sorry, no. I mean, no. For us, I think the key point is what we try to look for and what we try to aim for when we talk to companies is to build a certain kind of way of operating, a code of conduct, more or less, when you do a bot. I have seen so many bots where you just go completely bonkers because it just keeps hounding you and you don't want to do it. And what we're really trying to advocate towards companies as well is, look, ultimately, in the run, it will bring you a huge amount of value. Because more and more, let's face it, TV doesn't really exist anymore. I have currently Netflix, Disney Plus, Apple TV, or Apple Plus, and honestly, I never watch normal TV anymore. People are moving away from these type of medias already, and there's no real communication grounds anymore. Then when you look at email, email is becoming tough as well, because honestly, my mailbox through days, what, 200 emails? And ultimately, I don't know anymore what is what. So a lot of them are, if it's not directly at me, it goes into the bin. And I think a lot of companies are getting overflown. I've seen now with a lot of companies as well, they're switching to WhatsApp. So you have now teams communicating on WhatsApp because you have via email, nobody reads the email anymore. It's becoming an absurd situation. Now, with the bot and with also looking back at the usage of WhatsApp, the bot gives you that engagement moment at the time of when the consumer wants to be engaged and so on. So rather than doing the push approach, we say, okay, try the pull approach, so that the consumer is interested in engaging with you and not the other way around. If it is a push approach, then basically ultimately you will not win. But a pull is that. So that means, one, you need to make the bot sexy. It needs to be funky and funny to deal with, and otherwise forget about it, because it will never help you moving forward. Yeah, if it's stale and dated, then ultimately there is too many other choices for the consumer out there to move towards. So it's really about bringing that level of interest, code of conduct in when engaging with the consumers, and from there you have a very successful formula basically moving forward.
Thank you so much, Jerome. I think the insights that you have given are very interesting and a
No,
different
thank you.
perspective of how it's not easy to create bots and how much process and thought goes behind building one. So that's really insightful. Thank you so much for this interview.
Well, thank you.
So we'll be back soon with a new episode. So stay around for the next one. Thank you.
Thank you.